Well, that was certainly a race. A scorchingly hot Sunday, coupled with a hard tyre that was so slow no one would run it, meant the Spanish Grand Prix descended into a tactical battle which got completely forgotten, courtesy of Antonelli's engine giving up on life. The safety car caused absolute chaos, and with a hard tyre fitted, Max Verstappen was always going to lose out. Lose out he did, as he dropped to 4th straight from the restart before losing his temper and 4th position to George Russell a few laps later, a mistake which would cost him 5 more places by the end of the race. His decision to run into George Russell may end up costing him far more though. It was a chaotic, action-packed and controversial race, and today I'll be focusing on Max Verstappen and Red Bull, who had their worst race since the 2022 season opener in Bahrain. There's a lot to unpack, so don't go anywhere. With how close the competition has been this season, every race is proving absolutely vital to the World Championship. Heading into the Spanish Grand Prix, Oscar Piastri led the drivers' standings by 3 points from his teammate Lando Norris. Verstappen was a further 22 points back, and despite his win in Imola, was at risk of falling out of touch with the McLaren drivers. There were some expectations that the changes to flexible wing rules would mean that McLaren's performance advantage over the rest of the field would be cut, but despite the predictions of Red Bull and Ferrari, they looked as strong as ever. McLaren have been saying for months that if their competitors want to copy their ideas for performance gains, then looking at their brakes and flexible bodywork is a mistake. On the evidence of yesterday's Grand Prix, they weren't lying. Piastri converted an imperious pole position into a very comfortable race win. He managed to avoid the signature slow start, which appears to be the only weakness of the McLaren car, to get to turn 1 in the lead, and from there, he was never under threat from any driver. Norris wasn't so lucky, losing out to Verstappen into turn 1 and almost losing another position to George Russell, who decided to back out of what would have been a brave move down the inside. Max held second for the first 12 laps, but only because Norris was nursing his tyres through the opening half of the stint, before going on the attack and regaining second on lap 13. From there, Max never really looked at risk of losing a position to those behind him. In fact, his surprising 3-stop strategy almost worked out when on lap 52, the battle for 11th place allowed Max to get within half a second of Norris, but despite a much fresher soft tyre, he was never a threat in 3 air. With the race appearing all but done, the Mercedes of Andrea Kimi Antonelli provided the perfect end to the tactical battle of the Spanish Grand Prix. When the safety car was deployed, all the leaders and most of the rest of the field pitted for fresh soft tyres. But because of their 3-stop strategy, Red Bull's choices were limited. They had to choose between leaving Verstappen out on his soft tyres, on which he'd done 8 racing laps, or pitting for either another set of softs that had done 1 qualifying lap and the in and out laps, some practice starts and the lap to the grid, or a new set of hard compound tyres. They decided on the hard tyre, a tyre that no one had run during the race because it was roughly a second a lap slower than the softs and over half a second slower than the mediums. If he'd stayed out on his 8-lap-old softs, Verstappen would have been leading the race for when the safety car ended, meaning the win was on if he could keep the McLarens behind him for the remaining handful of laps. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner admitted that in hindsight, the best choice would have been to leave him out. It was a huge mistake from Red Bull, and one that cost Max dearly. As the safety car ended, the hard tyre almost ended Max's race. A huge snap coming out of the last corner at the restart threatened to send him into the barriers. He pulled off an otherworldly save to keep going, but the lost speed allowed Charles Leclerc to breeze past him, and that was when the real problem started. Verstappen was already annoyed at his team for making the mistake of putting him on the hard tyre, and his frustrations grew when he and Charles made contact as the Ferrari passed him. Then into turn 1, Russell went for a move to Verstappen's inside, but banged wheels with Max while doing so, sending Max into the escape road. Verstappen went onto the team radio to say that he'd been run off the track, but after the stewards launched their investigation into him leaving the track and gaining an advantage, Red Bull asked Max to let Russell by to avoid a penalty. By that point, Verstappen was furious. He was seeing his race fall apart and his championship challenge taking a huge hit. Max slowed out of turn 4 to allow Russell to pass, appearing to follow his team's advice before accelerating into turn 5 and colliding with the Mercedes and retaking 4th position. The stewards decided that Verstappen had significantly reduced his speed, thereby appearing to allow Russell to overtake, but that once Russell was ahead, Verstappen suddenly accelerated and collided with Russell. The steward's report on the incident also said that Max didn't have to give the position back to Russell for the Turn 1 incident, which meant Red Bull had created the problems themselves by telling Max he had to give it back. Nonetheless, Max was the driver, and his moment of madness earned him a 10-second penalty, dropping him to 10th after the race, as well as earning him 3 points on his super license. That takes him to 11, one short of a race ban. If he picks up any more at the next 2 races in Canada and Austria, he'll be forced to sit out a race. Verstappen and Russell have priors, with no love lost between the two since George moved to Mercedes in 2022. Unsurprisingly, the two had very different opinions on what happened in Spain. But before I talk about that, if you are enjoying the video and want to catch more news and analysis this season, then make sure to press the like button and subscribe to F1 Reverse. Thanks a lot. So George Russell decided to call out what he saw as unacceptable behavior from Max. Totally unnecessary and sort of lets him down. I don't know what he was thinking. It doesn't really make sense to deliberately crash into somebody and risk damaging your own car. Risk a penalty. In the end, I'm not going to lose sleep over it because I ultimately benefited from those antics. George summed it up pretty well. The decision by Max made no sense. It cost him 9 championship points and could have ended up costing him far more if he picks up a race ban. However, it's easy to say that in hindsight, but in the moment, sometimes emotions get the better of people. That doesn't excuse what he did, of course, as George went on to say. You cannot deliberately crash into another driver. You know we're putting our lives on the line. We're fortunate the cars are as safe as they are these days, but we shouldn't take it for granted. It's down to the stewards to determine if it's deliberate or not. If they do think it's deliberate, then they need to have a hard precedent. Max is such an amazing driver, and so many people look up to him. It's a shame that something like that continues to occur. Verstappen did appear for his media duties after the race, but was unsurprisingly not very talkative. He refused to answer whether the contact was intentional. Does it matter? He answered when asked by Sky. He did say that he has no regrets about his conduct. In life, you shouldn't regret too many things, he said. You only live once. Verstappen is far from the first great driver to get involved in incidents like this. The greatest F1 drivers have always had a sharp edge. That drive to always succeed is what makes them so incredible, but also occasionally sends them over the edge. Schumacher was disqualified from the 1997 World Championship for trying to take out his competitor Jacques Villeneuve, and managed to get away with it in 1994 when he took out Damon Hill to win his first championship. Mercedes F1 boss Toto Wolff said that he saw a similar drive in Verstappen now. The great ones, whether it's in motor racing or in other sports, you just need to have the world against you and perform at the highest possible level. That's why sometimes these greats don't recognize that actually the world is not against you. It's just you who's made a mistake or you've screwed up. Sadly for Verstappen and Red Bull, it was a mistake that is gonna prove costly. If Max had any chance of challenging the McLaren drivers for the individual title this season, it's now gone. His 49-point deficit to Piastri looks insurmountable on current performance. Red Bull's 1 point from the weekend also sees them fall to 4th in the Constructors' Championship. What do you think of the incident? Do you think Verstappen's 10-second penalty was lenient? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.